So just last week I reviewed a World War II Holocaust movie called Persian Lessons. And I liked that one a fair bit, largely because of the story, the writing, the performances, and the filmmaking in general. But also because of the tone and the fact that it didn't feel as bleak as a lot of these movies do. Now of course there's a reason they often feel very bleak, because they depict some horrific stuff. But that one just showed that you don't have to go to the extreme with it. You can even bring in some levity without making light of the situation, without forgetting that the subject matter is still very serious and rather grim. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, I feel like this one pretty much did the opposite here. It was basically completely void of humor and just focused on the human drama and suffering. Which again is understandable, but I feel like that approach has been taken so many times before. And I feel like there are so many movies out there that have done it more or less perfectly too. Which makes this feel a bit bland in comparison to the best movies out there. Now, to its credit, the angle it takes is one I haven't seen dealt with a lot before. Because the main focus here is on a camp in Croatia that deals with a lot of Serbs being persecuted. But it also deals with a camp mainly filled with women and children. And those two things do make this feel rather unique and like a fresh experience. But unfortunately there are some major issues with this movie as well. And I guess the big one being the lack of a strong protagonist, which was surprising to me, considering the title of the movie and the fact that this girl Dara is the only character on the poster. And even the description of the movie mentions that the story follows her as she's sent to a camp in Croatia. And it does follow her story, that much is true, but she's not much of a character. In fact, for the first hour of the movie, it would be very generous to even call her a character. She's barely on screen, and during her brief appearances she does basically nothing of importance. The focus is more on the women around her, but not really one specific character. So this one takes a bit of a scattered and unfocused approach and spreads itself a bit thin. Instead of focusing on one or two characters and taking the time to really build them up, it jumps from one to the next and barely gives them any time to develop at all. Now, to its credit, a couple of the women, I would say maybe even a handful of them, managed to actually do quite a lot with the little screen time and focus they were given. But that just tells me that had they been given even more to work with, this could have been great. Now, I will also say that in the second half of the movie, Dara actually does get a lot more screen time and turns into something like an actual protagonist, but even then it didn't really feel like she was really the priority. And for some reason I still found the other characters around her more compelling. I think one of the reasons was the fact that she just has basically no agency at all. She does very little that makes any difference, and she doesn't have much of an impact on the flow of the story. And while the other women actually don't end up making that much of a difference either, because of the circumstances, it feels like they're at least actively trying, doing things. And yeah, that was my biggest issue with the movie, the lack of a strong protagonist. And had they chosen one of the other women to focus on and center the story around, I would have liked this a lot more. But with that being said, I don't think it was a bad movie, and I still thought it had some redeeming qualities. However, I can't really convince myself to give this much more than a low 6. Boop. So should you watch it? I mean, it looks like a lot of people have actually really liked this. It has scored very high on both IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, so maybe you'll love it as well. But I didn't, and I do think the flaws are pretty obvious and glaring and hard to overlook. But I mean, I'm no expert and you're free to do as you wish, because after all, I'm also not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel, because that would be fantastic.